The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We have so much to discuss today that I'm going to get right into it. I won't waste any time. The narrative over the last few months, and particularly about 6 weeks ago in the Democratic primary, was that Bernie Sanders was surging in early primary states, including a pretty sizable lead in New Hampshire, and even in several polls, a lead in Iowa, and a resurgence nationally, while not taking a lead over Hillary Clinton, that he had the momentum. We then had the first Democratic debate. We had Hillary Clinton's public testimony before that House Benghazi panel. And this has seen a huge shift in Iowa. A new poll from PPP in Iowa finds that Hillary Clinton has not only reestablished a sizable lead in Iowa, but she has actually grown it significantly, 57 to 25 over Bernie Sanders, 7% still hanging on there, just an edge of that electorate for Martin O'Malley. So Hillary Clinton has seen a big shift in Iowa. And in terms of her net favorability ratings, more broadly speaking, she has seen a 15-point improvement over the last 6 weeks, from plus 42 favorability, meaning 65 see her favorably, 23% see her unfavorably. That net favorability of 42% has increased to 57%. The good news for Bernie Sanders, and there is some good news here, is that he has continued to become more popular also, going from a net favorability rating of plus 36 to plus 42. So Hillary Clinton is dominating with some key groups in Iowa. Seniors, she's leading 74 to 13. With women, she's leading 61 to 21. She's leading across the board with other groups as well. Young voters, as we expected, as we've been reporting, young voters are the area where Bernie Sanders does best, within the margin of error, essentially, down 3 to Hillary Clinton in Iowa. This is very good news for Hillary Clinton. People are emailing me saying it's over for Bernie Sanders, David. It looked like there was a window there where maybe he could have taken the nomination, but it is now over. It's way too soon to say that. What is clear is that the more people know about Bernie Sanders, the more his name recognition goes up, the more his favorability goes up as well. So as people become aware of Bernie Sanders, they like Bernie Sanders. However, Hillary Clinton's public presence, including the first Democratic debate after a period of sort of limited public visibility, and the Benghazi panel, which was just an abortive backfire for the Republicans looking to smear her, are really helping Hillary Clinton. The PPP poll also had new numbers for Republicans in Iowa, and we are starting to see more of a spread of support among the Republicans. Donald Trump and Ben Carson still essentially tied in first place, 22 and 21% respectively. But we see Ted Cruz now up to 14%. Marco Rubio is at 10%. You have then Huckabee and Jindal at 6% each. The stunning part is that Jeb Bush, who was at some point in this thing sort of the presumed favorite, is down to only 5% in Iowa. And Carly Fiorina, who saw a little bit of a debate bump after I believe it was the second Republican debate. Now it's hard to keep track. She is now also at 5%, and many people saying that it is just over for Jeb Bush. We will see. So not the best numbers for Bernie Sanders. Great that the more people know about him, the more they like him. Not looking good that Hillary Clinton now, as her public presence becomes more visible, is just surging. I mean, really way ahead in Iowa, which was one of only a couple of states where Bernie Sanders appeared to have a shot. We will continue to follow it. Something that could maybe turn things around in Iowa for Bernie Sanders, now that he is down over 30 points to Hillary Clinton, is his new television ad. Bernie Sanders has released his first TV ad of the 2016 campaign. He was recently interviewed, I believe it was in an interview with Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, where he said, yes, we are going to be doing television ads and they are going to be running in some of those early primary states. And that is indeed happening as of Sunday morning. This is a 60-second ad. It is called Real Change. It will air, it is airing in Iowa and New Hampshire, the first two primary states. Let's listen to the ad. Let's watch the ad. And then I have some thoughts about it.
The son of a Polish immigrant who grew up in a Brooklyn tenement. He went to public schools, then college, where the work of his life began, fighting injustice and inequality, speaking truth to power. He moved to Vermont, won election and praise as one of America's best mayors. In Congress, he stood up for working families and for principle, opposing the Iraq War, supporting veterans. Now he's taking on Wall Street and a corrupt political system, funded by over 1 million contributions, tackling climate change to create clean energy jobs, fighting for living wages, equal pay, and tuition-free public colleges.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Bernie Sanders, husband, father, grandfather, an honest leader, building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
So the ad goes into Bernie Sanders' backstory, his focus on fighting injustice, really a sort of populist approach to an ad. It touts his credentials as mayor, as congressman, and now as an independent senator. More populism in terms of being for veterans, being against Wall Street corruption, being in favor of a living wage and tuition-free college. And this is pretty common at the beginning of campaigns, a focus on the positives about the candidate, providing the backstory. This is particularly relevant with Bernie Sanders because his name recognition deficit is one of the big holdbacks that he's experiencing here. The ad does not mention that term, democratic socialism, which is something that Bernie Sanders has been identifying with for a long time. But at one point, if you watched the ad as opposed to just listening to it with us just now, you saw the word socialize appear on the screen at a certain point. So this is interesting. We will see whether Bernie Sanders in the TV ads plays up the democratic socialism or whether he doesn't. In that first debate, he certainly took it head on and accepted it, not a label that he is shunning or running away from. He then talked about himself as a husband and a father, which was sort of interesting because in the past, Bernie has been against the media focus on the personal lives of politicians as a sort of distraction from important issues. But I think it's a smart move for Bernie Sanders in the sense that everybody knows, for the most part, Hillary Clinton's family situation. She doesn't have to play up her role as a mother or more recently a grandmother or the fact that her husband is Bill Clinton. People are more familiar with that. Bernie Sanders, on the other hand, is less of a known entity to many. So while I agree with Bernie that sort of personal background and those ludicrous questions about focus about his hair that he received from Anna Marie Cox in that interview a few months ago are sort of silly, I think it probably makes sense to the extent that he wants to frame himself in a particular way to people that don't yet know him, to mention his credentials, and I use that term loosely, as a husband and a father. A lot of money was spent on this ad and will be spent on the airing of the ad, and we know that TV ads make a difference. We've talked about endorsements. It's not really clear how much endorsements matter outside of maybe a sitting president endorsing you. We know that TV ads make a difference. So what about this particular ad? It's a fine ad. It's not amazing. It's not lame. And an interesting thing that stuck out to me was that the voiceover was done by a female voice. It's pretty rare that you see political ads voiced over by women. Hillary Clinton recently voiced over one of her own ads, and that's certainly more common. But typically when you have a sort of third-party narrator in these ads, you hear particularly for male candidates, you hear a male voiceover. And I think that this is actually a very smart way to appear more palatable to female voters without looking like he's pandering. And that, I think, is what sometimes can happen when you take these ads as an opportunity to really go after one particular group. We know Hillary does very well with female voters, and that's an area where Bernie has a deficit. And I think that this is actually a pretty smart way to go about some attempt to appeal to the female vote, which right now is going disproportionately for Hillary Clinton. The big question we have as the ads start to ramp up is, will we see negative ads? Bernie Sanders has said he will not participate in the attacking his opponent's game, at least with regard to the Democratic primary and Hillary Clinton. We will see if the Democratic primary ads turn negative. And I think that the better Hillary Clinton does in the polls, the less likely you will see negative ads unless it really starts to get closer, at least as far as Hillary Clinton is concerned. I received an interesting email about not who is likely to win the Democratic primary, but who is more electable nationally. And Brett wrote to me and he said, "Hey, David, I know there's been a lot of focus on Bernie Sanders' chances of winning the Democratic nomination. He still has a long way to go to catch up to Hillary Clinton. But what about the question of electability? In the past, there's been concern that Bernie may be too far left to be electable, but recent poll numbers suggest Bernie is doing better than Hillary against some of the top Republican presidential candidates." So I took a look at this. I went on Real Clear Politics and I took a look at these hypothetical lineups. If it's Bernie versus ex-Republican compared to if it's Hillary versus ex-Republican, here's what we found based on an average of recent polls on these hypothetical matchups. Hillary versus Donald Trump, okay? Average of recent polls has Hillary at 46, Trump at 43, essentially within the margin of error, a tie. When we look at Bernie versus Donald Trump, 47 to 42, a slightly bigger margin, but still very close to the margin of error. When we look at Jeb Bush, who at this point doesn't appear like he's on the fast track to being the Republican nominee, Hillary versus Jeb ahead by 1.6, well within the margin of error. Bernie versus Jeb, we have Jeb ahead by just under 1 percentage point. So Bernie doing slightly better than Hillary against Jeb, but it's essentially irrelevant. It is within the margin of error. And then Hillary versus Ben Carson ahead 48 to 43, starting to get to the limits of the margin of error. And Bernie versus Ben Carson, we don't have numbers. That I was not able to find any numbers on that. So I disagree with Brett that it's clear that Bernie Sanders is clearly more electable relative to the other compared to other Republican candidates versus Hillary Clinton. But to be perfectly frank, it is so early right now that I don't think we're going to get much value out of looking at those polls and looking at those matchups, particularly when you look at them and you see that both Hillary and Bernie are more or less within the margin of error against the more likely Republican candidates. This is an important question, though, because when we think about how we feel about Hillary Clinton's positions on issues and Bernie Sanders' positions on issues, it's really important to think about who we would most like to see as the nominee. But we also have to be pragmatic in some sense and think about who is more likely to succeed in a national election. Right now, I don't think we have definitive numbers to say one way or another, but we will, of course, continue to follow it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Unlike lots of those corporate media shows you may be aware of, maybe flipping around on your television, we are not funded by big media conglomerates nor multinational corporations. We're actually funded mostly by our audience. So if you like our show, you can vote with your dollars and support us directly at davidpakman.com/membership. It really does mean a lot to me whenever I see a new member subscribe, to have created something that is of enough value to people, to our audience, that we can actually support the show and grow the show based on individuals who say, this is important enough to me that I'm going to pay so that they can keep going. It really does mean a lot to me. And today's new member of the day is Gabe Sember. And as with all of our members, I can't thank Gabe enough for his support. And you can join Gabe and sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. You might remember after last week's Republican debate on CNBC, the Republican candidates started coalescing around criticizing the moderators and CNBC and the questions that there were in that debate. And what the Republicans have now done is come together with a list of demands for future debates. And it is as funny as what you would imagine it to be. Although interspersed with the lunacy in the requests that the Republicans are making for future debates, there are actually some pretty good ideas in there that I think are very good ideas to implement. So the list is long. The list is ludicrous. We may someday hold the list up as a possible low point in the Republican Party's 2016 primary race, which seems to be a runaway vehicle in the direction of an explosive, fiery crash in the nomination of an absolute lunatic. Let's put that aside for a second and just focus on the specifics of the list. The Washington Post's Robert Costa obtained a letter which the campaigns all sent together to hosting networks of future debates, and they say that the letter is being sent on the behalf of the 15 Republican presidential campaigns. They say that these are the requirements, their demands for future debates. Number one, and this is a good one, allow candidate-to-candidate questions. I absolutely agree with that. I've moderated a few mayoral debates in Massachusetts, and I always insisted that there would be a period where the candidates ask other candidates questions, and it was one of the most fascinating parts of the debate. So that I absolutely agree with. Next, they want a lightning round. Now, notice I'm not saying lightning round. I'm saying a lightening round, as in to make something lighter in color, because they've misspelled that. The letter requests a lightening round, Lightning. I don't know what that means. Apparently, it's just a quick one-word answer type of thing going through with a bunch of different issues. Okay, it's starting to get crazy. Number three, the Republicans want reaction shots of members of the audience and or moderators during the debates. Okay, I mean, I'm not against it. I don't really know what that will add. I guess trying to use the audience to sort of influence the viewers, the TV viewers, in terms of how their ideas are being received. All right. They want empty podiums shown after breaks, and they want a description mentioned of how far from the stage the bathrooms are. I don't get it. I truly don't understand the point of that. And they also want shots from behind the candidates where you can see their notes. I guess maybe hoping to catch somebody in a Sarah Palin notes on their hand type of thing. I don't know. They also would like it publicly stated what the audience participation rules are. And I guess the idea is if the moderators say the audience has been told not to make noise, and then the audience makes noise after a particular candidate speaks, then maybe that would make people be angry and think less of that candidate. I don't really know. And then this is interesting. Certain candidates apparently want the temperature kept below 67 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know which candidates those are. I would assume it's Marco Rubio, at least being one of them, because he's always noticeably sweating. His upper lip is all shiny. His hair starts to get all shiny. Who else sweats noticeably during the debates? I don't remember. Rubio is definitely the one that stands out to me. So I almost expected to see on there, no questions could be asked about what newspapers candidates read, maybe thinking back to that disastrous Katie Couric moment that Sarah Palin had. Those are the demands from Republicans. Here's a crazy story. The Texas Supreme Court is going to hear arguments over whether Christian parents of homeschooled children have to follow basic education standards, or whether if you are doing Christian homeschooling, you can opt out of the state's education standards. There is a particular family here, the family of Texas couple Michael and Laura McIntyre, who homeschool their 9 children in a motorcycle shop where the kids were doing very little in terms of schoolwork other than playing instruments and singing songs, according to witnesses. And one witness overheard a child say, "There's really no point in doing actual schoolwork because, quote, they are going to be raptured," as reported by the Associated Press. The family got on the radar of school officials when the oldest daughter ran away and tried to enroll in school. Think about that for a second, okay? Most kids want to stay home from school. One of the kids here ran away from home to try to go to school. That's how bad the situation is. At least one kid of the 9 was aware of the disaster. A lower court ruled against them, and now the Texas Supreme Court is going to decide whether, even if you are doing religious homeschooling, which, I mean, it's a disgusting term that we even have to distinguish regular homeschooling from Christian homeschooling, whether you still have to abide by the state's educational standards. This has to be child abuse. I mean, think about, this is why the state has to have the ability to protect children. We know there is not going to be a rapture. The idea that you don't really have to learn stuff because we're all going to be raptured to heaven or to hell or who knows where soon anyway is not a valid reason to not educate children. These kids someday are going to have to buy their food. Some kids these days are going to have to pay rent or pay a mortgage. The parents are setting them up for failure, to be unproductive members of society. And this reminds me of when I interviewed this guy named Mike McHugh. This is an older interview. It's on our YouTube channel. He is an advocate of Christian homeschooling. And I said to him, does it really make sense? Are we really setting kids up for success when we're homeschooling them based on the stories of a guy who was born to a virgin, died, and went to heaven? And he said that he found my question offensive. My question was offensive to him. And the question could not be further from offensive. The question is a very real question about how we are setting these children up to fail. And one of these 9 girls in this particular family apparently realized that this didn't make any sense. I don't know if we can say that about the other 8. And I hope that the Texas Supreme Court rules that no, religion does not allow you another opt-out, which is you don't have to educate your kids in a way that's connected to the real world. You must do that. If you are choosing to homeschool, then there are just some basic educational requirements that have to be met. 61-year-old Marshall Leonard of Tupelo, Mississippi, has been charged with placing an explosive device after allegedly setting off an explosive at a Mississippi Walmart over the weekend. Now, under Mississippi Code 973725, he could get life in prison if convicted, according to the Tupelo Daily Journal. Tupelo Police Chief Bart Aguirre said that a vehicle pulled up to one of the entrances of the Walmart in North Gloucester about 1:30 a.m. over the weekend. Quote, a white male got out, lit the package, and threw it in the vestibule. There was an employee on break, and the suspect told him, you better run. The employee did run away and was away from harm when the package exploded. It wasn't a large explosion. It didn't cause a lot of damage in the store. No one was injured, fortunately. The remnants of the explosive device were sent to the crime lab. Now, here is where it gets really interesting. Why did this man set off this bomb at a Walmart? A supporter of the Mississippi flag, the 61-year-old railed against anyone who wanted to remove it because it contained within it the Confederate battle flag. He spoke out against Walmart when Walmart decided to stop selling items that contained the Confederate flag. Last Wednesday, Leonard posted threats on the Daily Journal's Facebook page saying, Journal Corporate, you are on final warning. You are part of the problem. As a result of this, y'all are going down along with Walmart, WTVA, Reed's Department Store, and all the rest of the anti-American crooks. I'm not kidding. No messing around anymore. This is domestic terrorism. This is domestic terrorism carried out by none other than a white male. It is not being reported as terrorism by corporate media. Corporate media hesitates to describe acts as terrorism when it is a white guy who is sort of part of the nebulous patriot movement that the Southern Poverty Law Center has been following for a long time. On what planet is a politically motivated bomb attack not terrorism? End of story. A politically motivated bomb attack is terrorism. And the stupidest thing about all this, fortunately, no one was hurt. People could have been hurt. The stupidest part is that, do you think all of a sudden now Walmart is going to start selling Confederate flags? Why would they do that? Walmart, for all of the negative things we can say about them, is not going to change their mind and start selling Confederate flags because a lone individual person decides to set off a bomb over his anger that they don't sell Confederate flags. I wonder if this guy would call all Muslims terrorists without seeing the connection between his actions and extremist Muslim groups like ISIS. He's probably blind to the insanity of what he's doing, a little too blind to see that. Am I going wrong on this somewhere? Let me know on Twitter. I'm on there at @dpackman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by George Christie, who's former president of the Ventura Chapter of the Hells Angels and also founder of Felony Prison Consultants. George, it's so great to have you on. For people who are not familiar with the Hells Angels, they may only hear about the Hells Angels as a motorcycle club. They may only hear about the Hells Angels as a sort of pseudo-criminal group. What is the truth, as someone who can speak to this with personal experience, about what the Hells Angels is?
Well, the Hells Angels is a motorcycle brotherhood, and depending who you discuss the topic with, what law enforcement agency, the federal government says we're a criminal organization. We've now have gone international. The local cops continually view us as a street gang because it suits their law. So depending on what the agenda is for that particular law enforcement agency, you're going to get a different definition. But law enforcement all has made allegations for years that we're a criminal organization. This started in the mid to early 70s. And then ultimately in 1979, there was a racketeering trial in Northern California, and the government failed to prove their case.
And there have been, as you mentioned, a number of different allegations about criminal activity. Many have never been substantiated or proven. And at the same time, there have been convictions for everything from drug dealing, trafficking of stolen goods, etc. Talk to me about whether you see the activities of individuals who are part of a Hells Angels chapter as separate from the activities of the group or as part of the group. In other words, do you see it as the group is involved in activities as an organization, or that it sort of just so happens that some of the individuals who are part of this motorcycle brotherhood are engaged on their own time in activities that may or may not be legal?
Well, I think the record speaks for itself. They've never been able to clump us in one sum. I think the racketeering trial in '79 proved that it was just a terrible waste of money and a monumental failure for the government. So they, discontinued coming after us like that because it hasn't been successful. And, I can tell you that the club goes out of its way to make sure people don't discuss illegal activities, and as an organization don't participate in illegal acts. Now, what individual members do on their own time, with their own associates, the record speaks for itself, and I won't make excuses for that. But in any organization, you're going to have issues like that. You can go to the state Senate, the United States Senate, Congress, American Medical Association, pharmaceutical companies, banks, whatever it may be. You've got individuals that like to take shortcuts, and they look at some of these illegal activities not as illegal activities. They look at them as perks of the industry they're in. And depending on who you speak to, law is a matter of interpretation sometimes. And I'm certainly not saying, somebody that goes out and commits an overt criminal act and, there's no excuse for it is seeing that as a perk. But some people do justify it in that manner.
So talk to us a little bit about, in 1976, you were in the Los Angeles Charter. In 1978, you founded the Ventura Charter. What were the on-the-record activities of the Ventura Chapter?
Well, I think we should go back to Los Angeles because there were some monumental things that happened down there.
Okay.
We ultimately wound up getting in a conflict with the Mongols Motorcycle Club, a conflict that is still thriving today. There's recently, is maybe 12 months ago, individuals were shot and killed, in a chance meeting on the I-15 freeway. So there was bombings, there were shootings, people went to prison. We made a move to Ventura in 1978, and there was a lot of things that happened over that 35-year period. I, saw members arrested and convicted. I saw members arrested and acquitted. I also saw the clubhouse come under attack. There were allegations and suspicions that the federal government, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms people had thrown a hand grenade in there after the 1984 Olympics. We traced the spoon of the grenade back to Akron, Ohio, which happened to be the same area that the ATF squad had come out to do security for the 1984 Olympics. So, it goes back and forth on both sides, but there's been some convictions, and like I said, there's also been some acquittals. If you want to cite something specific, I'll certainly be more than happy to address it.
Well, I will get to that. How does a motorcycle brotherhood chapter, like the Ventura chapter, for example, make money? Because when you read online about your past and about the charter, you read about the club's business operations, and that term is often not made more specific. How is the chapter making money? What are the proceeds coming from?
Well, the individuals work for themselves. Most of the individuals, have to support themselves. There's a lot of guys in construction. There's a lot of professional people. I was a small business owner. I owned several businesses. I owned a tattoo shop, a bail bonds business, a t-shirt business, a martial arts business. So, I had a lot of different things going. I had a concert promotion business for a while. But the way the money comes in specifically to the charter or the club itself is through dues and benefits, things of that nature.
And I'm fascinated about the tattoo business because that connects to the 18 months you spent in prison just a couple of years ago. And I want to get to that. But before we do, in 2011, you ultimately resigned your presidency of the Ventura Charter after, as you said, many decades. And yes, you were excommunicated by your former brothers. Talk to us about the circumstances of you leaving and why it happened the way it did.
Well, I think that I had reached a point in time that I had felt and was starting to feel that we had become the people we rebelled against. And, there were two sets of rules, a set of rules for the elite members, which, was the leadership. And then there was a set of rules for the general membership. And I started addressing these things. And I became disillusioned, and I walked into a meeting and resigned. We were also in conflicts with every major motorcycle club in the United States and abroad, and we're about to engage in another problem with the Vagos Motorcycle Club, who we'd had a long relationship with since the late 60s and had usually gotten along with them. And, the Vagos petitioned me. They said they wanted to know what the problem was, and I couldn't get to the root of it. And the group of members that felt they had a problem with the Vagos no longer saw the vision I saw. And I think if you're a leader and if you're a good leader, you have a vision. And if that vision is only seen by you, then maybe you're not a leader anymore. So I reevaluated, where I was going and what I wanted to do. And I felt that if I did stay in the club, I certainly could have stayed in the club, but it would have strictly been for my ego. And I've never been one to not speak my mind. So I walked into a meeting, I resigned, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I became the subject of a social media smear campaign, which I found kind of amusing. We're supposed to be this secret organization, and now suddenly we're involving people on social media, not only to attack me, but to club business and situations that happened. And I just found the whole thing kind of ironic.
Let me remind everybody, we're speaking with George Christie, former president of the Hells Angels Ventura Chapter. We're going to go to a break on our radio and television program. We're going to continue our conversation with George Christie, and the full conversation will be posted to our YouTube channel.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Last week, we told you that the internet activist group known as Anonymous, some call them a hacktivist group, was going to unhood 1,000 KKK members. And yesterday, around midday, I start getting a ton of emails saying, oh, wow, we have the information from Anonymous. There are 4 sitting Republican senators who are KKK members. There are sitting mayors. There are all sorts of public officials who are KKK members. Media went crazy. It was reported on Daily Kos and Politics USA, USA Today, The Root, Huffington Post, etc. Some of the more careful media outlets realized that it may not have been part of that actual anonymous release that was the source of this information, and they decided to not name the names of some of those Republican senators. And now, as we have had a few more hours to sort of think about this, it has become clear that this release yesterday, accusing numerous elected officials, who I will not name because it appears to be untrue, at least as far as we currently know, those releases were not part of the release we discussed a week ago. The Operation_KKK Twitter account posted, OpKKK was in no way involved with today's release of information that incorrectly outed several politicians. And I started thinking about it, and at some point, and I get it, it would be truly compelling if there were 4 current Republican senators that were members of the KKK. But at some point, we have to apply some common sense. The KKK is very small, right? The overall white male population, which is sort of the, population that the KKK draws from, is huge, but actual KKK membership is very, very small. Some people estimate 3,000 to 5,000 people. The statistical chance that 4 of 100 senators are members of the KKK is very, very low. Now, it's not impossible, right? And you could say, well, no, because if you consider that men in the Republican Party from the South are more likely to hold the beliefs that line up with the KKK, even if you do that, it is still statistically insanely unlikely that 4 Republican senators are members of the KKK. As Mediaite put it, you'd have to believe that a Klansman is roughly 10,000 times more likely to become senator than the average American. Or put another way, there are supposedly twice as many Klansmen as Princeton graduates in the Senate. That just does not make sense. Now, without naming the politicians involved, because I just don't think it's fair to them to continue bringing them up, because it doesn't appear that these releases were at all accurate. Several of them have already issued denials. One said, "I'm not a member of the KKK." Another said the accusation is false, insulting, and ridiculous. Another said, "I have never had any relationship with any kind with the KKK. I am opposed to everything it stands for. I have no idea where the information came from, but wherever it came from, it is wrong." So at least for the time being, we don't have evidence that current senators are members of the KKK. Sometimes people do want to believe something so badly that they forget to apply common sense. And I think that is exactly what happened here. We will keep an eye out for the actual release of the 1,000 KKK members that Op KKK of Anonymous says they will be releasing. It just hasn't happened yet. Let's give you an update about the Tesla autopilot that has been released for Model S. I told you last week that automaker Tesla released an update called Autopilot for their Model S, which made it essentially autonomous. It is not called autonomous yet because you still legally need to have a driver there, but it drives itself and it is essentially an autonomous vehicle. Now, there was video that was released last week, which made it appear as though a Tesla automobile swerved into oncoming traffic. And it's not clear whether that video was legitimate or not, but we are now getting video of how the car is self-improving with regard to its autopilot. The software that the Tesla has learns from the driver, and it learns from just driving around on autopilot. A number of Model S owners have posted online, for example, number one, the first day, when I was in the right lane, as I approached exit ramps, it would dive for the exit ramp, and I quickly learned to apply torque to the wheel to hold the car on the highway until I passed the exit. Each day, the system seems to have less of a tendency to follow the exit ramps in that way. Another Tesla Model S owner said, "I noticed that on sharply curved ramps connecting I-80 West with California 113 North in Davis, California, the first time it took the curve at full speed and wasn't able to stay in the lane, resulting in one of those take control immediately alerts. But after a few more times on the curve with firm pressure on the steering wheel, it has now learned to slow down and today had no issue taking the curve. Definitely learning." Here's another interesting video that has been released of an Uber driver who uses a Tesla with autopilot to do his Uber driving. The autopilot brought the car to a stop as someone actually swerved from the opposing side of the road into oncoming traffic. And immediately, as you are seeing here, the Tesla autopilot slows the car down, and the driver said, "I wasn't even able to honk the horn before the car came to a stop." Imagine how much better of a driver you were 1 month after you got your license, 6 months after you got your license, and 2 years after you got your license. Now imagine if you were able to put together all of the driving that you and your 16-year-old friends did, if you were 16 when you got your license, over the first year, and integrate all of that into your driving profile. The improvement in your driving is hard to even measure. I mean, we're talking about an exponential increase in safety, and that is what it appears will happen as the Tesla autopilot system continues to improve itself, as it already has been doing. We have a voicemail number. It is 219-2-DAVID-P. Call anytime. Here's the Eggman calling in about my interview with a former Baltimore police officer last week. Take a listen to this.
Dave, you didn't see The Wire, did you? I can't believe you interviewed that Baltimore cop yesterday. Very, very good interview, by the way. I love that guy. And you didn't make any reference to the series The Wire at all. Not one single Not even a joke or a reference or even a question about the reality of it or anything, man.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is I have not seen The Wire. Everybody tells me when I say, oh, here are the shows I like Breaking Bad, and I like House of Cards, and I really liked Damages, and I like The Americans. Everybody tells me, you've got to see The Wire. And I think The Wire was on HBO, which I just don't have. So it's not on Netflix. And I'm not really sure. I guess maybe I need to get it on Amazon streaming. I'm not really sure. But yes, I know I really need to see The Wire. On today's bonus show, an airport security scam in the Philippines is really causing a problem. A grandfather leaves a 5-year-old girl in the desert with a gun. And I have an update for our members on the 2016 Hatriot Mail Calendar. Subscribe to the David Pakman Show membership program. Support the work we do. davidpakman.com/membership. I will speak to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.